there's about 4 or 5 meetings going on at the same time. I've got a lot of committee members. I know some of them have got 4 meetings around 2 o'clock. Others have 2 or 3. So we're going to have some members probably coming in and out, but we've got a quorum here. Appreciate everyone being here. We've got our sign-up sheet. We're here for Regulated Industries to hear 2 bills this afternoon. It's been a busy week, been a busy day, and it's going to be busy this afternoon, tomorrow, and Monday. So let's have a word of prayer and ask the Lord to bless us in our endeavors and give us strength to get through. Lord, we do thank you for this day. Thank you, Lord, for breath of life. Thank you that you've allowed us to waken this morning. And Lord, we just, as we say that, we think of our dear brother Bob, Lord. We ask you to bless his family. We thank you again for his life and his friendship, for the joy he was when we spent time with him and talked with him. And Lord, we just ask you to bring peace and comfort to the family today. And we know, Lord, that he's gone to his eternal and heavenly reward. Lord, we ask you to bless this meeting. Lord, we ask you to bless the work of the committee. We thank you for these members, for the ones that spend time deliberating and doing the work of the people of Georgia. We thank you for this opportunity and the responsibility you give us. Bless us in all that we do. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. We've got a sign-up sheet here. We've got several people that signed up to talk. I don't know if there's anybody else out here that's going to have a burning desire. If you feel like when we go through the meeting you just can't leave here without speaking to us about something, we'll try to give you an opportunity. If you can pass on that, we would be happy with that too. I was about ready to vote against a couple of bills this morning in the House. I could have voted 10 minutes before the people got through explaining the bill to me. What was it? Somebody told me they were creating their own rain delay. I believe is how it was put. Anyway, enough of that. Thank you for being here. Chairman Stevens, you have a little proposition before us.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Make sure I get you table mic on. I'm sorry.
There we go. Thank you, members of committee, Mr. Chairman. We've had hearings all over the state this past summer as we have continually watched our Hope Scholarship continue to dwindle, and that essentially is what we called it, the Hope Preservation Act. We've seen our scholarship dwindle from 100% funding down to 70% funding, and in some cases less, but that's an average. And if you will, Mr. Chairman, back in 1992, we had a referendum that was statewide that began the gambling process in the state of Georgia, and it has fully funded Hope for most of those years. And of course, I have 2 daughters that are beneficiaries of that, and really the reason I'm here today is 3 grandchildren that I hope that this revenue will be there for them whenever we promise them, if they keep a B average, that they will that they'll get an education not only from our university system, but where the real jobs are and the real future is in our technical schools. And the ones that I have now, as you might know, we're on a lottery system with the with pre-K. And I believe that that's the foundation where things start, and we've got an opportunity to do something about that here today. I'll speak briefly about the previous bill and the things that we talked about as we went around the state, as we were looking at tourism destination resorts that, by the way, had casinos as part of that equation. We started out with a total number of licenses in the state that was going to be 6. In the substitute in front of you, Mr. Ramsey will explain in just a minute some of the changes we made. We started off with a tax rate of 12, and with the numbers that came back at $239 million, as I recall, that fully funded Hope. That, I'll say that again, just at 12%, fully funded Hope. And then we started looking at some other pieces. The economic development of the entire casino projects and these tourism destination pieces. And that really began to spike some interest. As you might recall, with Caterpillar and with Baxter and some of these other major economic development projects that are $1 billion or more, we rolled out the red carpet for these people to come in and create these projects to create jobs. We found that just one of these projects in Atlanta would generate 25,000 permanent jobs, plus, in this area would generate 25,000 jobs, 10,000 jobs just to build the first one alone. We set some very high standards in the minimum investment in this area, and of course I'll get Mr. Ramsey to speak on some of the changes that we've made because we have made some changes. But Mr. Chairman, this is an incredibly long bill, as you might. The one that you've got in front of you is 71 pages, and it's very detailed oriented. We have, and there's something in it for pretty much everybody. It's as people, there's been conversations about problem gambling. We've got 2% of the revenues in the original bill that would go directly to these grant projects to fund these programs for people who have a gambling problem. We also put up to 4% in the original bill to go back to the locals, and they're the ones that have to deal with this. But the real key to most of this stuff is there are really three major obstacles before any of this stuff can happen. Number one, of course, is it has to come out of the House and Senate, and the bill, of course, needs to be signed with the governor. But the other major obstacles, and they're big ones, it has to pass a statewide ballot for a constitutional amendment, and it has to pass a local referendum. You have to want it in your area before it can even be considered. And the other piece is your local elected officials have the authority to put that on the referendum. So there's tons of stopgaps and obstacles in the way, if you will, Mr. Chairman, that make this a very, very user-friendly bill, if you will, for the people in the district that you live in, because it's not coming unless you want it. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I will answer any questions. Those are the high spots of the old bill, and I think Mr. Ramsey, Representative Ramsey, might have the changes on the new one.
So you want to discuss some of the changes in this, and let's make sure we've got the right LC. If you'd go over the LC that we're looking at, please, make sure everybody's got it.
We should have, there should be two measures in front of the committee. One is a constitutional amendment, which is LC 363047S, and the enabling legislation is LC 363043S.
All right. You have those. We are looking at the enabling legislation, LC. Good gracious.
363043S, Mr. Chairman.
363043S. Okay, everybody got that? All right. You want to tell us the changes that's been made into this piece of legislation, sir?
Happy to, Mr. Chairman. As Chairman Stevens said, we spent the entire summer studying Is that better? Okay. So we spent the summer looking at these proposals that were put forth, not just Chairman Stevens' measure from last year that he introduced towards the end of the session, but also horse racing and other proposals that have been put forth over the year proposing to provide additional revenue streams for the Hope Scholarship Program. And through that process, we learned a great deal. I think all of us kind of went from relative novices on what these proposals are about, what the structure of them should look like, what the best practices are, what kind of revenue we're talking about, the pros and the cons, the economic and social consequences, both pro and con. And I think we all developed a little bit or a great deal of expertise through the testimony of dozens and dozens and dozens of stakeholders across the spectrum. We spent a day down in Savannah, and we've joked a lot. We had an auditorium at Armstrong State, and this is probably the start of a good joke. But we were in a large auditorium packed with politicians, Baptist preachers, and casino executives, and spent about 6 hours hearing from each of them throughout the day. We had a couple of meetings here, and really did a real deep dive into these proposals. And the substitute that we have sitting before us today is really largely a product of those meetings and what we've learned, and a proposal that we think would be of tremendous benefit to give the citizens of Georgia an opportunity to vote on. And that's what we're talking about here. To echo Chairman Stevens, this is not a proposal to impose anything on anybody. It's an opportunity for the citizens of Georgia to vote on this measure, and then, if that's approved, the community in which a facility like this would come to would get another bite at the apple to vote on it again. So that's really what we're talking about here. First, I'm going to talk about the tax rate, because that's really fundamental to what we're talking about. We're talking about revenue for a governmental program, and tax rate obviously is what drives that. And there's a number of factors that affect and determine what the proper tax rate should be. Chairman Stevens' proposal came in at 12%, and as we went through the process, it became clear to the members of the study committee that the tax rate, we could get it a little higher, and that's really what we're trying to do. And the goal in setting the tax rate to us is, how can we maximize revenue and still get the product that we want? And what we're talking about here, there's a whole range of gambling facilities or casino facilities that you can talk about. What we're talking about here are destination resort type facilities that derive a great deal of revenue from non-gaming revenue, things that have a job benefit, a tourism benefit, an economic development benefit. They're world-class hotels and restaurants and entertainment venues. That's the type of product that we're talking about, because in addition to the revenue that you derive from the gaming activities, you also have the value add of revenue from all these other activities on site, and it really accompanies what we're trying to do as a state from a tourism and economic development standpoint. At the other end of the spectrum is a warehouse with a bunch of slot machines in it. We could push the tax rate up to 40 or 50%, but what we're going to get is a warehouse with slot machines in it without the benefits of the tourism driver, the economic development driver, that what we're talking about, as we talked about through the study committee, what we really want to see when and if this ever happens in our state. So in looking through it and looking at what other states have done, comparing tax rates, looking at the competitive states around us, and looking at the unique and really excellent characteristics, particularly of Atlanta, we felt very comfortable going from 12 to 20 from a tax rate standpoint. It keeps us competitive. We believe it's calculated to lead to the type of product and would still allow that kind of investment from the industry. But it's not just tax rate that drives it, and we're going to talk about some other things in the bill, and they all kind of go into determining whether we have a viable structure that will allow the type of facility to come here that we'd like to see and maximize the revenue for our governmental programs. The next factor that is determinative of that is the licensing fee. We've moved the licensing fee up just a little bit. Originally, in Chairman Stevens' bill, the Atlanta license, which is the large primary, and I'm probably assuming that y'all are familiar with the bill, and it's probably a bad assumption. I've been looking at it so much over the last year. But originally, the way the bill was structured, as Chairman Stevens introduced it, there were six potential licenses in the state of Georgia, 2 in Atlanta, and then 4 in regions set up around the state. And as he said, we've gone from 6 to 4. The largest license was in Atlanta, and the license fee would have been $25 million. We've moved that up to $40 million. Again, we believe it's reasonable. It enhances revenue while also, I think, keep us competitive. The secondary license, which is also in Atlanta, what the current bill calls for, I'm going to talk about the rationale behind how we've set up the licenses and locations here in a moment, compared to Chairman Stevens' bill, remains at $25 million. It's a limited license. It limits the number of gaming positions and is not unlimited as the primary license in the Atlanta region is. And then the 2 licenses for Region 2, I'm going to talk about what Region 1 and Region 2 are in a moment, are $15 million apiece, which is $5 million above where they were in Chairman Stevens' original bill. So in the original bill, it was set up where there were 2 in Atlanta, 2 licenses in the Atlanta zone, and 4 around the state. This calls for 4. Still 2 in Atlanta. We believe the Atlanta market can support 2, just from a population standpoint, from a tourism standpoint, and we believe Chairman Stevens in the original iteration of the bill got that right from a market standpoint. Around the state, though, as we looked at it, it started to make less and less sense to us to artificially prescribe zones outside of Atlanta and tell the market where a facility should go. It was limited to certain counties per zone. So what we've done is created a second zone, which is literally the entire state outside of the metro Atlanta area. And through an RFP process, the 2 additional licenses will be awarded by the Casino Gaming Commission that I'll talk about in a moment, and the market will literally dictate where these licenses are awarded. Now, what we didn't want is 2 to go in the same locality. We wanted localities to be able to compete for this. So we've put a provision in place that the 2 licenses outside of Atlanta can't be within 50 miles of each other. So to making sure that if there's multiple communities that want to compete for one of these licenses and multiple projects that want to compete, there's an opportunity for those communities to compete through an RFP process that we've set up in the bill. Regulatory structure-wise, the original bill is set up by Chairman Stevens. Had the regulatory umbrella, this under the regulatory umbrella of the Georgia Lottery. As we looked at what other states have done and learned through studying across just kind of best practices across the country and hearing testimony from experts in the field, we began to gain a sense that the better practice from a regulatory standpoint is to have an independent Casino Gaming Commission whose only mission is to regulate the casino gaming activities that are provided for in this legislation. There's no bleed over of mission. There's no confusion. There's no there's no focus on multiple missions. This Casino Gaming Commission, its only mission and only focus is to regulate the activities. It's an incredibly unique industry. It's an incredibly complex and nuanced industry, and by setting up an independent corporation and casino gambling commission, we believe that's the best practice from a regulatory standpoint to ensure proper oversight and proper accountability with the industry partners that would come in and compete for and ultimately obtain a license. The way the Gaming Commission is set up, it's 5 members, 1 appointed by the governor, 1 by the Attorney General, 1 by the President of the Senate, 1 by the Speaker, and then those 4 members would, by majority vote, appoint a 5th member of the of the commission. There's very, very tight restrictions on what activities current members of the commission can be involved in. They cannot be in office. They can't be an appointed office. They can't serve as a political party official. They can't have any direct or indirect interest or have any family member in any applicant, licensee, vendor, procurement contract, no income, no benefit, no position of employment. It's very tightly regulated, the type of activities they can have, and that's been learned. We've looked at model legislation from across the country and used kind of best practices in all of them to arrive at this structure where we believe we could have the type of integrity in our oversight and governance of the activities in this industry that we could all be confident in. Budget. People ask, well, how are they going to pay for the regulatory activities? We have provisions in the bill where not less than 1% or more than 4% of the annual casino gaming revenues are going to be used for the operations. It's kind of like the lottery. It's going to be paid for out of the revenue that's derived from the industry. Minimum investment threshold. This is something that we changed slightly in the bill. In addition to a license fee and a tax rate, Chairman Stevens' bill also called for a minimum investment in the development and construction of the facility. The primary license in Atlanta originally was a minimum $1 billion project. To give you an idea of the scope of that, that's what it's basically costing to build the Falcons Stadium. In looking at what these projects have been, the investment level of these projects around the country, we have moved that up in this substitute to $1.25 billion. The secondary license in Atlanta was set at $500 million. We've moved that up to $750 million in the substitute. Those are the two Metro Atlanta licenses. The two Region 2 licenses, which is around the state, is set up at $400 million. Now, I will stop here. As we've worked through this, we put in place a provision in the bill where there's a 50-mile radius that the downstate or the outside of Atlanta licenses can't be within 50 miles of the 10-county region that is the Atlanta region. And as we've worked through that, we've recognized there's some unintended consequences by setting that 50 miles up. So we're working on some language so that 50-mile barrier outside Atlanta may change a little bit in the way we calculate that. We certainly don't want to prohibit a community from competing through the RFP for one of those other two licenses, but we also want to make sure that we maximize the value of those primary Atlanta, the primary Atlanta licenses, because that's where the lion's share of the revenue is going to come from in terms of education dollars that we're going to be generating. Use of the funds within the casino gaming education account. That's where the money is going to go. As gaming revenues are generated, they're put into a casino gaming education account. By law, 90%, a minimum of 90% of those revenues have to go into educational programs, including HOPE, other tuition grants and scholarships, and pre-K. So a minimum of 90% of those revenues. Let me tell you where the other 10% could conceivably go. First, a minimum of 1% will go to the Georgia Problem Gaming Assistance Fund, a maximum of 2%. In looking at what other states have done, we believe that 1% to 2% range is wholly adequate to fund a Georgia Problem Gaming Assistance Fund that will meet the needs of the very, very, very few people that have been found to need assistance. There's a 1% to 3% range of money that will fund the Georgia Licensed Resort Facility Host Community Fund. What that does is that sets up a fund to provide for the infrastructure and public safety needs that are created as a result of one of these facilities locating in a community. That is a program where the local community where they're hosting a facility, where a facility is being developed, can compete for money and ask for money and grants from that fund to do road projects, again, public safety projects, whatever's necessary to to address the needs and the burdens that are placed on the local community by the existence of a facility. And then finally, between 1% and 5% for the, as I said earlier, the operations of the gaming commission. So at a minimum, 90% is going to educational programs. More than likely, significantly more than that, as we look at the range of those other expenses, are probably more along the lines of in the mid-90s.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to wait till because that presentation is through.
I'm almost done. If you'll if you just hold, I'm almost done, and then I'm sure Chairman Stevens, I will answer as many questions. Well, Representative Mitchell, you broke my train of thought, so I'm going to. It is a very short train. That's right. That's right. So I'm going to. I think that's the crux of the changes. I really just wanted to touch on the changes that we made from his bill. The question some of you may ask: well, what was the estimated in terms of revenue? Would this generate for educational programs in Georgia? And we saw one economic analysis of his original bill, Chairman Stevens' original bill, which was a 12% tax rate, which estimated somewhere in the range of $280 to $300 million. With the tax rate going up in the bill, you're trading off a higher tax rate in the bill while losing to downstate licenses. We believe the revenue will, if anything, from that $280 to $300 million estimate, go up based on what we've put into this substitute right here. And again, 90% of that at least is going into educational programs in the state of Georgia. So I think I've talked enough, Mr. Chairman.
Right.
Would be happy to answer any questions.
All right, you're going to have a few, and then we've got a few speakers and may have some more questions here. Representative Mitchell, I think you have a question, sir.
Yeah.
You can direct it wherever you need to.
Yeah, I appreciate the obvious hard work that is going into this. Thank you very much, Chairman Stevens. In fact, you've answered many of the questions, but 1% to 5% of the revenues are going to go to grants, gambling assistance, operating expenses. What triggers the upper echelons of the assistance? So from 1 to 3 was going into grants, 1 to 2 in the gambling assistance. What triggers the amount?
That's done through the appropriations process annually. It's put into a dedicated account, and then the governor makes a recommendation in the budget. It's similar to how we do the operations of the Georgia Lottery right now, where the governor makes a recommendation on how much it's going to cost to operate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And to add to that, we originally didn't have a floor in there, but we wanted to give assurances that these important programs are going to get funded, and that's why we added the 1% floor on those 3 different pots of money.
So it'll be up to our advocacy how high they raise.
Number 29. 29, is that you, Alan? Okay, Mr. Chairman, I thought that may be you down there. I just turned. Oh, wait a minute. Try it again. Just check the back of the. Let's try number 28. All right. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. You know, I certainly do applaud the actions of the chair about stimulating, and the author of stimulating some debate on this issue, since it is out there. But I do have a question or two I want to ask. In 677, the enabling legislation, something I have a lot of concern about. You know, the rest of it, the constitutional amendment, that's basically at the right time, will be to put it out there for the voters to make a decision on. The duty of the General Assembly is to thoroughly vet and decide where any funds, if the people of Georgia decide to ratify this, would go. And as I read through this, my concern is, after my tenure in the General Assembly, is a continual idea that we need to dedicate any and other funds to education. Now, granted, we all know there's not enough money in education, but practically speaking, we have a bigger problem that affects more taxpayers than just those that are educationally eligible, and that's health care dollars in the state of Georgia. Would this author, would they consider, and the committee, would they consider at the proper time that we start vetting this, that we look at other venues to dedicate money if the citizens of Georgia decide to pass this constitutional amendment? And I specifically say that there's no greater need than health care and finding the money. Every year the Appropriations Committee meets. Every year we look over what OPB and the governor's office puts forth. We're always piecemealing money. It's between public safety, it's between roads, it's between all the various departments. But there's always one department, one area of government that always goes lacking, that affects more people in the state of Georgia than just the Board of Regents, and that's health care. Whether it's a Medicaid reimbursement rate that has been severely shortfall for years, whether it's Medicaid slots, whether it's a rural hospital, whether it's public health facilities, whether it's those things that actually help the vast majority of Georgians. Would we be in line into thinking that the author would be open to us to look at these other areas that money could possibly be spent if the people of Georgia decide to ratify this amendment?
You know what? Whenever we put this bill out there, it was under the pretense that we were going to continue to fund the Hope Scholarship, which is even though the numbers are greater and continue to rise with our lottery, it can't keep up with the demand of our best and our brightest at home. And of course, on the other side of the scale, on the education side, as we've gone through this process, there's been an enormous amount of requests that we cap somehow, get control of our continuing increase in fees and tuition, and that's I think our good Representative Ramsey is going to tackle that issue as well. But it is a broad, and this is a first stab, ladies and gentlemen. It's a point well taken. I will mention today, just today, we passed a bill out that incentivizes up to $100 million, as I recall. The process where somebody can use a tax credit, as we did in the film tax credit proposal, at 30%. This uses 80%, that directly shifts these funds to these hospitals that are on life support right now in some of our rural areas. That in itself is going to help the rural healthcare hospitals. But I'm not opposed at all, if it's not constitutionally prohibited, that we look at other areas as well.
Thank you.
All right, number 24.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a couple of questions for the author. The distribution of revenues, 90% to education, 1 to 2% to problem gaming. Is that by statute or by some other methodology? Is it those are mandated in the bill? Because I haven't gone through the entire bill. It
is mandated in the bill by statute. It sets the range. The 90% is set in the bill. So that's the minimum that can be put towards education. Then there's 3 pots of money that one is arranged from 1 to 2%, which is the problem gaming, 1 to 5% on the operational expenses, and 1 to 3% on the local community fund, and that's set in the enabling legislation.
Thank you. And another clarifying question on the $1.25 billion that's required in the primary location. Is that all inclusive of the cost of construction, including land acquisition,
yes, sir,
building, materials, fixtures, furnishings, all of that? That's not just the construction of the building, then.
It's all of the above. There's a definition in here. It's 71 pages. I can find it within probably 3 or 4 minutes, but I'm not going to try to find it right now. I'll have everybody wait for me to look, and I can point you to a line number. So within 5 minutes, I'll point you to that definition. But it is inclusive of land acquisition, construction costs, development costs, permitting costs, all the above.
Thank you.
And I think that starts on 29, line 1025 is where I see the 1.25 billion, I think, maybe where it starts. Any other questions, Representative Lett? Thank you, sir. All right, number 23. Yes, sir. Chairman Martin.
To Representative Ramsey, or I'll let you guys decide if I throw it out there, and Chairman Stevens. So to go back further to the gentleman's question, you mentioned these were outlined in the statute. Isn't it further than that? They're actually outlined in the constitutional amendment where the ranges would be. Is that not true? I'm reading. Do I not see that, or is that?
Yeah. It is. It's both in the enabling legislation and the Constitution.
Well, I just given some conversations we've had lately about the legislature's intent to dedicate certain fees, and this being a large pot of money, I just wanted to make that point that it not only is it outlined and the ranges will be subject to budgetary times, but we can't go outside the percentages. So the 90% is going to get to
education.
As it is written right now, to education or otherwise. And to follow up, I think Chairman Stevens is exactly right. The bill we passed today gives $100 million in credit, but at 80% actually will generate $125 million for our rural hospitals. The quick question I had, the sales tax, this doesn't contemplate any sort of sales tax exemptions or anything for the creation of these. I know a lot of times we have mega, economic development projects, and isn't it true that this is not contemplated here? If they come in to build this $125 or $1.25 billion facilities, certainly some of it would be, land, and of course that's not subject to sales tax. But this does not contemplate a sales tax exemption. So the local area in which it would be built, if it passed all the steps you said, would also get their local percentage, 1, 2, or 3% of probably half of that cost of building.
Mr. Chairman, it's you probably hit on the nail on the difference in the typical economic development project and this one. They not only will get the local LOST, SPLOST, ELOST, build the schools and build the projects. In addition to that, none of these other economic development projects, I don't care which one you're talking about, whether it's Caterpillar or any of those out there, where we roll the red carpet out and give tax incentives, they're not asking for a dime. And then on top of that, the massive hotels that are there will generate hotel motel tax. In addition to that, there you're looking at your 20% rate. There's nothing that's out there that doesn't require any incentive at all. You probably hit on the nail that shows the difference in what this economic development project is and compared to anything else that's incentivized by the taxpayers. This is not. Good question.
And you got further, if I can, Mr. Chairman, this will be the last one. So they're not looking for an exemption on the construction, nor are they looking for exemption, some sort of an enterprise zone of not paying taxes or hotel motel tax on the enterprise.
No tax abatement.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Is that it, Mr. Chairman? Chairman Martin?
Yes, sir.
All right. Turn you off. Let's go down to number 14, and then we'll come back up the table, Brother John. You're next.
This is just to add on to Chairman Powell's suggestion. I realize we got a 90% rule here, but speaking to the gray matter that's behind this bill, and I don't mean to sound redundant, but if there's a % or two that can be used, healthcare is very important, but with that small amount, if we could direct that to mental health, I think we would all be well served if we found just a % or two for mental health, because we're so far behind in that one area that would be really beneficial to Georgians. Thanks. That's it.
I keep turning mine off. All right, number 25. Is that you, Brother John?
25 is
yes,
me.
sir. Thank you, Representative Effenbaugh.
Chairman's. Any of you can answer this. It's just for clarification. You're saying 20% or 12%, whatever it turned out to be. What exactly is that on? Where is that 20% figured on? And then hotel, motel taxes, food in the restaurants be taxed normally?
Yes.
So what is the 15 to or 12 to 20%?
The 20% is the tax that we place on any gambling proceeds.
I would turn your attention to line 182. Is the definition of gross gaming revenue, and it's as he said, it's the revenue derived through the gaming activities within the casino. And on top of that, you have, as you said, hotel, motel, sales tax, property tax, income tax from all the employees, on down the line.
Okay, so blackjack would come.
That would be part of the gross gaming revenue, yes, sir.
That's in a gambling game, I know. Thank you.
Miss that. Thank you, sir. Number 15. All right. This is the last question I see here, and then we've got some speakers that want to come up and talk to us about some issues. So number 15.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo what Representative Hawkins said and say that I would really like to see some of this go toward mental health and drug treatment, so we can try to put some of our broken families back together that are really taxing defects and some of our other court systems, jail systems. So I just wanted to echo what he said, because I think that would be a really good idea to take money and allocate it, because I think that's one of the most pressing needs that we have in our state, is to work with mental health and drug addiction and try to help mend families. Thank you.
Point taken.
All right, ma'am. Thank you very much. That's all the questions I see at this time.
Sounds like to me they want to expand Medicaid here.
Well, did you hear that? All right. We got a few people who want to speak, if you don't mind. Dr. John Kentz, is that right? Yes, sir. You want to come up and share just a few minutes with us, sir? I heard the motion there. We got to listen to our speakers for just a minute. Thank you. Thank you for being here, sir. I believe you're from the University of Illinois.
Yes, sir. Jason, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, House members. I should mention that I have a JD MBA from the University of Georgia. I'm an old bulldog person, and a couple of advanced law degrees from the University of Virginia Law School. My colleagues and I have been studying this out of the University of Illinois, and I have 11 grandchildren here in the state of Georgia, and quite a few relatives. So I think of this as almost a second home. I do think of it as a second home. And my colleagues and I have been studying this for years and years, and I've heard all of these arguments for almost 30 years. Sat through hundreds, thousands of hours of legislative hearings. My colleagues and I have testified repeatedly before Congress on these types of issues. And in fact, we heard all of this 30 years ago, and it was so disturbing to our federal officials that the Congress, with an 80% bipartisan vote, passed the United States National Gambling Impact Study Commission. This was passed in 1995, and 1999 it completed its report. My colleagues and I testified before this commission under oath as expert witnesses on many different issues. And the conclusion of the commission was there should be no expansion or a moratorium on the expansion of any type of gambling anywhere in the United States. And it specifically called also for no slots at racetracks, trying to save racetracks. Well, I've heard that there's legislation that's just been moved here in Georgia to do exactly that. It also said that there should not be slot machines or electronic gambling devices convenient to the public, and where they already existed, they should be recriminalized. And in fact, Governor David Beasley in South Carolina, neighboring state, spent several years recriminalizing, and you probably remember this, the slot machines in South Carolina. Well, subsequent to this commission, we have had, and by the way, it's the same color as Kingsfield's volumes for those of you who are attorneys. We have the United States International Gambling Report, which is participated by hundreds of academics across the country. It's cites and acknowledges over 100 congressional offices, over 50 U.S. Senate offices, and it reconfirms exactly what the National Gambling Impact, the Congressional Commission, said. Look at the negatives on this. This is not all a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. There are serious consequences to this. And I'll just point out a couple of them. One here is 40 economists say expanded gambling doesn't work. Well, can you get 40 economists to agree on anything? Well, they agree on this. And my colleagues and I have never had to debate a reputable economist or academic on these subjects, because it's just universally accepted that yes, there's gold coming in, yes, there's construction money coming in, but what's the downside of this? Well, look at where the money is coming from. We're not talking about a consumer business here. We're talking about something that is different. And I'll give you a quick example. And by the way, we cite Warren Buffett, Howard Buffett, the Federal Reserve. We have thousands of pages of authoritative congressional hearings, government reports, multiple volumes that say, take a step back. This is not what it's being pushed to be by the industry. And I'll give you a great example. In Warren Buffett's hometown, Omaha, Nebraska, they had a racetrack that was going out of business, and they said, well, we'll make it into $1 billion destination tourism casino resort. And the entire political establishment there said, no, we're not going to do that. Instead, they bulldozed down the racetrack. It was Exarban Racetrack, Nebraska spelled backwards. They bulldozed it down. They turned it into a high-tech office park. It attracted condos, entertainment centers, and it's a $1 billion development of a consumer development, not a gambling development, which is totally different. It's a consumer development. And guess what? They just located the new College of Business for the University of Nebraska right at this old gambling casino, proposed casino site. Now that is economic development, and that generates what's called a economic multiplier effect. You've all heard of that. It's about a 3. And so you're generating more and more economic development. Gambling doesn't do that. Gambling today is not about destination. It's about slot machines, electronic gambling. 90% of the revenue in many of these instances is coming out, not out of blackjack, it's coming out of slot machines, electronic gambling. That's where the action is. Well, slot machines don't create jobs. You just dust them off and collect the revenue. So we see what is happening in state after state is that the slot machines are coming in. It's all about slot. You've heard this argued, even for the Georgia lottery. We need slot machines. We need electronic in convenience stores. Exactly what the National Commission said, please don't do. Well, the national press is getting it. We have Newsweek here talking about young people getting hooked on gambling. This makes I just heard Governor Deal talk about the social problems here at lunch, about problems here with funding, and you're focused on all of that, and I compliment you on that, and I'm sure everyone does.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up here in a minute. We've been about 7 minutes.
Okay.
So if we can wrap up, I want to give you about 5. We've been about 7, if you don't mind.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this just makes everything worse. This will intensify all social problems, what we call the ABCs. The electronic gambling is known as the crack cocaine of creating new addicted gamblers. Your bankruptcies go up 18 to 42%. Your crime goes up 10% per year as people get hooked on these gambling machines and resort to crime. I cited at previous hearing, which I don't think has been even published by the committee, as have some other colleagues have not had their testimony published, citing to Mercer Law Review, citing to Emory Law School, citing to the University of Georgia. There are several colleagues right here in Georgia who can talk about these things. I don't think any of them have been called before any of these committees. And the final thing I would indicate, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your courtesy, sir, is that if we look at the front page of Time magazine, they get it. Once you do this, you won't be able to keep the tribal casinos out. Tribal casinos may come in, and I and colleagues have testified before Congress under oath about this. They will be forum shopping, reservation shopping, and will come in and will establish their lands, establish their casinos, and it's just not a system that works well. So I would just urge the committee to please take some time, go to the National Commission, which is volumes, 10 volumes of research on this, see what they said about this, and I think you will concur that there are some serious, serious drawbacks about this when you go to a gambling economy versus a consumer economy. Thank you, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? I believe you spoke to us at a meeting here in last August. Is that correct, sir? Or were you Savannah?
No, it's in Savannah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, sir. Mr. Norman Easterbrook.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm Norm Easterbrook, Director of River Center in Columbus, Georgia, and I appreciate the opportunity to have this dialogue with the committee. I just wanted to bring to your attention some concerns that have come up through the Georgia Arts and Venues Coalition that was spearheaded by the Fox Theater here in Atlanta. River Center is the result of 15 years ago of the Columbus Challenge, a really remarkable community effort to land and support Performing Arts Center in the heart of Columbus, Georgia. Lots of energy went into that campaign. Currently, we welcome audiences in excess of 100,000 annually. This past year, we will go over serving 22,000 school children in the community with programs that originate from River Center. I came to River Center in September, but I'm not really a newcomer to Georgia. 26 years ago, I came to Augusta and established the Imperial Theater as a nonprofit corporation, put it back in its downtown development plan, and then beyond that went to Americus, Georgia, and finished the renovation of the Rylander Theater there. Fortunately, those theaters thrive as a result of the very, very hard work of their administrations and of the communities that surround them. In the past 12 years, I was director of the Ford Center at the University of Mississippi in Oxford, Mississippi, 90 miles from Tunica, Mississippi, about 120 miles from Philadelphia. And this is the concern that I have when we think about this, is really the business model for the casinos. We had a very difficult time securing the attractions that we would have liked to have had at Ford Center because of the contracts that are signed between the artists and the casinos. It is a very common business practice in the field, and it's acceptable to write into contracts mileage exclusions, sometimes 90 to 120 miles beyond the venue in which the event is taking place. This protects your investment. That's a great business practice to protect your investment. The real problem occurs is when the casinos have a buying power sometimes 2 to 3 times what some of the performing arts centers can afford to pay for some of these attractions. And therein really lies the difficulty. Wherever a casino resort lands, were you to draw a 90-mile radius around that, you can pretty much assume that these wonderful facilities that we've worked so hard to build in communities across the state of Georgia will in fact be impacted by that casino, and they will be limited by terms of what attractions they can bring to the theater. And it's not just community arts centers. It's outside independent promoters that use our civic centers. It's outside independent promoters that use our trade and conference centers as well. So that's the facts we'd like to bring to the table. And I'm trying to be as brief as I possibly can in consideration of your time. So I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
And yes, ma'am, would you introduce yourself, ma'am?
I'm Mary Susan Wheeler with the Woodruff Arts Center here in Atlanta, Georgia. We just echo the same concerns. We own the Verizon Wireless Amphitheater in Alpharetta, so we would worry about the livelihood of that, which would also affect the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. All right, number 17, I believe you were up, Representative Mitchell.
and sensitive to their issues. As a matter of fact, I heard this discussed previously. I'm interested to see if you have a solution to the problem that you have just brought to the committee's attention.
Coalition is, as I understand it, and again, I was having arrived in September. This process had already started. The coalition has looked and is investigating other scenarios in which casinos have coexisted, and they involve any number of business models, limiting the size of the capacities of the auditoriums, the types of stages and construction they can have. That's worked in some communities. I think there's a lot to explore with that, and I think there is a grounds on which certainly these two industries, and I think they're distinctively different industries, could coexist. But it's going to take a lot of discussion. And I would also remind you, too, it varies by market. Different markets have different trends in entertainment. So there will be variances, I think, depending upon where a casino resort development lands. Does that help?
I think so.
I would just
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I would just affirm a commitment to work with you guys as this moves forward. I think everyone's sensitive to that concern. I met with I don't think it was either of you, but somebody from the Fox Theater, I believe, in a local amphitheater. The local amphitheater in Peachtree City even came and talked to us about it. And as whatever steps are ahead for this process this year, I'm leaving after this year, so we'll be working with somebody else next year. Certainly, this is not a unique concern. They just did a deal in Boston, and it was an issue that was raised from the local cultural arts center. I think it's certainly it's an issue that's solvable, and I totally agree they can coexist. So, thank you.
Same remarks as Chairman.
All right. 24, Representative Flood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too have the same concerns, and would hope that we would find some way of addressing this. Just as a question, the facility in Columbus, is it in any way impacted by the gaming facilities in nearby Alabama?
At this time, no. We don't see the same types of resort. It's the casino resort language, the casino resort model that this comes up with. We have not seen that affect us from Alabama, no.
Thank you.
All right, Chairman Martin, came back to you.
Yeah, I think we spoke earlier today, and I have visited, had the opportunity to visit with the gentleman that does the Fox, and of course know Ms. Wheeler. And I would just say this, and offer to what Chairman Ramsey said, and also Representative Flood. I would hope, as Representative Randy said, should this go forward, and then should this come to fruition, and these be enterprises, that these are going to be business enterprises. They're not just gambling halls, if you would. They would be business enterprises, and I would hope they would look to team with the local performing arts centers and create a synergistic business environment. I would hope that would be. I mean, I know there's going to be invariably some competition, but I'm certainly understand that they would have an ability to get an act and offer things and with a revenue source that would be more than yours could be. So I affirm Representative Ramsey's commitment. If my voters invite me back, I will be back next year. So if we're still working on this, I will make sure you're heard.
Thank you.
All right, that seems to be all the questions, my friend. Thank y'all both for being here with us.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Mike Griffin, Georgia Baptist, you have a few words you want to share with us. Come on, start the clock, sir.
Wait, let me hand this out first.
Oh, okay. All right, let you hand that out before we start the clock. All right, get some of the notes out to us. Have a notepad.
Mr. Chair, I can assure you his remarks are going to be very good.
You may turn on that mic so you can say that.
I hear a lot of murmuring up there. I tell y'all, I'm hanging out more at gambling hearings than churches here lately. I found a subject that's got more interest than religious liberty. There have been 14 bills related to gambling brought about this legislature since last year. I think that's setting a record. And what I'm handing you out is from a horse racing testimony, because I can about preach this sermon almost anywhere.
Now you're counting bingo and everything, or you count the bingo?
Yeah, I'm throwing the bingo in. We might as well. Without the bingo, it's 13.
Okay.
So it's a baker's dozen. But Anyway, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to speak again on this subject. But Georgia Baptist represents 1.3 million plus citizens in the state of Georgia, over 3,600 congregations. We've been able, over 20 times since 1963, the convention has passed resolutions opposing gambling in some shape, form, or fashion. We believe that it jeopardizes the moral integrity of our state. We believe that Baptists believe as Christians we're commanded to stand and defend the weak, the defenseless, the needy. Matthew 22, verse 39 tells us to love our neighbor as ourselves. That's hard to do if we're seeking pleasure and profit at the expense of someone else's pain and loss. You notice I'm skipping some stuff. Legalizing more vices in our society is just a bad way to raise funds in the name of children and education, especially egregious when it's proven a fact that gambling has such a negative effect on children and families. While proponents argue funds will help our children, the real consideration is what are we actually teaching our children when we legalize more gambling and demonstrate that it's okay to encourage people to throw their money away in hopes of an exceedingly rare possibility of winning. This is a vice that preys on those who can least afford to throw their money away. The great number of people have to lose in order for someone to win. Some father, some mother will have to lose, and who will lose the most? I tell you, children will. And yet again, many say this is for children. Creating jobs and raising funds for education is a bad rationale to attempt to legalize immoral behavior in our state. We cannot become sold on the idea that the end always justifies the means. Many have become convinced over these last few years that money can be put over morality, and somehow morality will still win out. All the rationales that you hear here today are the same things that we hear. I've asked the question in the, is it going to be called horses for hope, cash from casinos? One day will it be money from marijuana, and God forbid pennies from prostitutes. We just got to be careful when we use that as the bottom line. Casinos are a bad bet. It's been proven in other states that these forms of gambling have devastating effects on the moral and social climate in their communities. The societal cost of gambling is substantial. The risks include various consequences: breakup of the family, increased local crime, local job loss because citizens change their spending habits, bankruptcies, increased child neglect, domestic violence. Not to mention the fact that once the gambling industry is allowed to operate legally in our state, the power that they're going to be able to have here will be just unbelievable, and to be almost impossible to be able to counteract the money and the influence of the gambling industry. And I know we keep hearing this over and over and over, that we just want to let the people decide. Well, I just want to remind you, we're getting close to Easter. And there was a man named Pilate that wanted to let the people decide. You're not put down here to just let the people decide. The people have decided to put you here. And it will not be a fair fight when you put this out here for a vote. There's no way that we can come against the money and the power and the influence. And if the people are so much in favor of this, why in the world we have to have 35 plus lobbyists and millions of dollars to have to continue to browbeat these legislators to do what they know good and well? The people in this community really are not pushing for this, definitely not pushing for it in Republican primaries. And when this was put on the ballot as a straw poll, it was at best 50-50. Georgia Baptists represent those communities. I'm just saying, I'm going to communicate to you just like the AJC seeks to communicate to this constituency that, we have representatives that should not be letting these kinds of decisions thrown back on the people and put under such pressure that they'll be put upon with all the, I'm just telling you, everything that glitters is not gold. And in this industry, it's devastating. We dealt with horse race a couple of years ago, and last year, it's always like, this is not casinos. Well, lo and behold, we're just coming right out with casinos. We're dealing with the sports fantasy. Oh, this is not, it's not casino. Everybody always says it's not casinos, as if everybody knows that nobody here wants their child to grow up one day and work in a casino. We know that, and I think we all know that it has a a moral implication here that's very, very far-reaching. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions, Mr. Griffin? Yes, ma'am. I don't think it's working. No, try number 16 over there. See if it's... Try push the back of it. There's a little button on the back. I think it needs to be pushed.
So if we were to take the funds and the proceeds from gambling, because it's like a voluntary tax.
There you go.
Thank you. If we were to take that and put that into a program, or at least half of it into a program for mental health treatment and drug addiction treatment, would you be in favor of it? Because we have such a critical need, and you know, to me, the breakdown of the family unit is one of the biggest problems that faces our nation. And so if we can do something to help save families and get people, you know, from drugs and
it's the end justifies the means, and syntax is always regressive. They bite you on the backside. You know, the social costs are devastating, and they help create the problem that you're trying to raise the money for to help solve the problem.
we already have the problem.
Well, I know, and you're just going to, I think you're going to exasperate it, make it even worse with this. That's the whole point. We're already dealing with, it takes $80,000 to $100,000 to rescue one child from the sex trafficking industry. Is there anybody here that thinks that creating casino environment is going to decrease sex trafficking in Atlanta? And we've got to think that it's not children that are creating these vices that are being affected by them that's destroying the homes, it's adults. And whether it's in the area of liquor, or whether, in a Baptist preacher, we've been fighting liquor for years, and it's, you know, we're not going to sell it on Sundays. Now we're going to sell it on Sundays. Oh, well, now we need to sell it at 10:30. Next thing you know, we'll be selling in every lemonade stand in the state of Georgia, because it seems like we don't know the end of this. Somewhere you got to draw a line and say, the problems we're experiencing in this state has a little something to do with the policy and the things that we're legalizing. Even when we try to do our best, which I think we do try to do our best, realizing people do have decisions, they do have to make their own choices. But I think this is definitely too far to go on this particular issue.
Thank you, ma'am.
You know, alcohol has been legal, and we're not selling it in all the lemonade stands. So, but I would, as a parent with, you know, a child that's graduated from high school and trying to move him to adulthood, I would be ecstatic if he'd get a job in a casino or anywhere at this point.
All right.
So, you know, but I just wanted to know if you would support it if the money went to families. So,
again, I don't think the end justifies the means.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Representative.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Tanya Diddy. And you're with Concerned Women for America, ma'am.
Yes, my name is Tanya Diddy. I'm the State Director for Concerned Women for America of Georgia, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to address the committee this afternoon. My comments will be brief. I did testify down in Savannah, and I know that my testimony is on record, but I just wanted to cover a couple points, maybe springboarding off of Mr. Griffin. Just a couple areas of concern. We're an organization that has the protection of family as one of our core issues. And we believe bringing in casino gambling is an antithesis of protecting families for the following reasons. First of all, we know that gambling hurts children, as been mentioned earlier. In my testimony in Savannah, I had done some research just on the impact of children, and I came across a term that I had never heard before, and it's called casino kids. And these are the children that are left abandoned in cars as the adults go into the casinos to gamble. It not only affects children, but also elderly adults that are left in the cars. This issue has become so rampant that the American Gaming Association has partnered with an organization called Kids in Cars to try to combat this growing issue. I don't know if you've ever watched a child who feels abandoned or feels left, feels isolated, but it's heart-wrenching. We've had that experience in our family, and I can't imagine going by the cars and watching these kids just sitting in the car waiting for the adults to come out. We also know that gambling hurts women. I don't have the statistics with me today. I'd be happy to provide them for you. But gambling addiction among women is on the rise, and oftentimes women are the sole breadwinners of the family. And I think we need to keep in mind the targeting of women with gambling. I also brought up in Savannah the impact that this is going to have on foster children and the foster care system. Our governor has worked aggressively over the past many years to try to help and put some good boundaries of finance around the foster care system. In 2014, the Atlanta Journal had a report on the foster care system, and at any one day there are over 7,000 children in the foster care system. There's no doubt that a gambling addiction is going to impact families, and we're going to have children in foster care. And the reason I know that is because we have that experience in my own family. Growing up, my parents were foster parents to over 100 children, and my sister Mary, my foster sister Mary, came to us because she was the product of a father who was addicted to gambling. And I asked her about this. A couple weeks ago, we were together at my parents' house. And I said, talk to me again about this gambling. Because I talked to her right before I had testified in Savannah. This is what she said. She said that her father, this is her quote, "My father gambled away our money, our food money, our clothing money, our rent money. He gambled away his dignity, and he gambled away the dignity of our family. My 3 siblings were dispersed among family members but ended up in foster care because her mother could not care for the kids." So there are social issues with gambling, and I don't think they need to be discredited and discounted. And I know I heard that you addressed, I think Representative Ramsey said in some of the rewrite of the bill that there was you addressed, putting more money to help this type of thing. I think if you would ask my sister today, I think she would rather have her father than the additional money going in to help this type of problem. Georgia State University conducted a study several years ago with the money that was earmarked out of the Lottery Commission. And they looked at the adverse effects on crime, college students, prisoners, etc. It's a huge study, and it all has to do with Georgia data. I approached the author of the study, the professor who was over the project, and I said, "Where did this data go? I've never seen it." And he said, "I don't think this data was ever used." I showed it to a member in Senate leadership at the time, and I said, "Have you ever seen this data?" And they hadn't seen the data. I would challenge you to go back. At Georgia State University has wonderful data on the impact, Georgia data, on casinos and what they would do to our state. I'd be happy to provide you the materials. It's hard to find the link online. You have to kind of dig around for it. So again, I just thank you for the opportunity of being able to address you this afternoon. I think gambling is poor public policy, and I think Georgia can do better than this. I think we're a better state than this, and so I appreciate your time and the opportunity again to speak to you today.
Thank you, ma'am. Your 5 minutes just expired. Yes, sir.
First of all, I'm not on this. I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. I just asked questions. So if the lady would entertain the question, do you consider the lottery that we have now gambling?
I do. I do.
Would you advocate the repeal of that?
I don't believe.
And I know they're two different things, but I just was curious about your.
Yes, I believe that. I think the studies have shown that Georgia has one of the most addictive addictive lotteries in the country. I think that's documented. I think Dr. Kent can probably provide you the documentation for that. I believe any time that you try to get money out of the state of Georgia on the backs of the poor is not good, and I think that it aims at that. So I'm not a proponent to any type of gambling, and I believe that the lottery is a form of gambling.
Thank you, Chairman Martin. Now we got another question. Thank you. Number 18.
I think you kind of got to it at the end of there. I just confirm if it was up to you, we would disband the lottery and eliminate the Hope Scholarship.
Oh, I didn't say eliminate the Hope Scholarship. I don't think that you need to be funded. I think, in my household, when I have to make choices financially, there are things that you might have to give up to want something else.
And you give up the revenue stream for Hope?
I think there are other options for revenue streams. I'm not here right now to be able to offer you solutions sitting right before you, but there are solutions. I want to be on record that I am not an opponent of the Hope Scholarship. I just don't think it needs to be funded through gambling.
Let's don't go back 30 years or so right now, okay? Let's look forward, not backwards, okay?
Thank you.
Can you help quickly, one more time, ma'am? Can you help clear this up, Chairman Taylor?
Actually, I'll waive, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, Miss Judy Kraft. Miss Kraft, concerned citizens from Gwinnett. Y'all want to share with us, okay?
Good afternoon. I'm Judy Kraft. I live in Peachtree Corners, Georgia, which borders Norcross, Georgia, and used to be Norcross, Georgia. I've been really coming down to the Capitol for about 20 years, working on public policy issues and mainly pro-family things. I've never been paid a penny or from anyone and never asked to be or want to be. I just want to be an informed citizen and share, what I know with others, say why I think something is good or bad. About possibly between 3 and 4 years ago, developer Dan O'Leary was exploring the purchase of land at Jimmy Carter Boulevard and I-85. And he was the developer, or he probably still owns, Underground Atlanta, and had always wanted to put a casino there. But this prime real estate was available at Jimmy Carter and I-85, and he was really trying to prepare for when casinos might be and promote casinos. Now that corridor, as you know, is along a stretch of the highway where, it has been known for an area where there's a lot of sex trafficking and illegal or drug trafficking and illegal immigration. That hasn't been an area, but we have a great sheriff in Gwinnett County, Butch Conway, who has really worked hard to lessen all of those influences in the county. Now, I was invited because I was considered a community leader to meet with Dan O'Leary, and of course he pitched this as a destination resort, and with nice restaurants and hotels, and possibly even a sports hall of fame. And we had all of the glossy presentation and everything. And I can tell you that nobody really bought into it because we really didn't want to bring in the elements of more pawn shops and the massage parlors or whatever, the elements, and increased crime. And I want to tell you the end of the story because it was a happy ending. Less than 1 year later, that prime real estate was purchased by the movie industry. And that is now a thriving movie industry that is benefiting people with jobs and a good addition to the community. Property values in Norcross are booming, and every little piece of land people are building houses. And there will be, will be coming probably a hotel and restaurant. So it's been a really good thing. Just a few blocks down the road is Mala, Georgia, which is going to be redevelopment. The point is, we have some good property, but we can develop Georgia and bring in revenue with good things, not bad things. You've heard a lot of the bad things, so I'm just going to go over a couple of the bullet points on here. Oh, by the way, Dan O'Leary wanted this to benefit the Hope Scholarship. So gambling harms communities. it talks about the average cost of treatment, and I don't think 1% to 2% would cover it. At least it doesn't for California. There is a suicide rate associated. Of course, it was mentioned the child abuse, and the divorce rates, just the ill effects of gambling. Just want to say that I don't think that we have to bring this in to. I think that the few dollars we're going to bring in for the Hope Scholarship does not justify bringing something like this into our state. So I encourage you to really take a look at it and ask if you want this, if you really want this kind of addition for Georgia. And what the other point that Mike made is, we are going to have a lot of money coming in with TV ads and billboards if you let the people decide. Yet this piece of paper that has all of the facts about the detrimental effects of gambling, what little pro-family organization is going to have the money to do a TV ad about that? Exactly none. So that's why you really, I think, need to be the ones to be to make that decision for the people that elected you, and that's what we hope you will do. Thank you.
Perfect timing, ma'am. Thank you. All right. That's all the speakers I have lined up. Does anyone here that did not sign up have a burning desire to come and talk to us? Just something you can't leave without saying? Hearing none. Okay. Chairman Stevens, you want to come back up? Representative Mitchell, do you have something? Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know if that was your. Okay. Chairman Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Rayner, the head of our, the Vice President of the Georgia Chamber, is held up in a deposition, and I've asked that I read the letter on behalf of the Georgia Chamber, and it says, on behalf of the businesses of all sizes across the industry sectors throughout our state, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce respectfully requests your favorable consideration in supporting House Bill 677 and House Resolution 807 from Representative Stevens in Savannah, which permits local governments to consider allowing casino gaming by local referendum as a means to further ensure the viability of the Hope Scholarship. The Georgia Chamber of Commerce has long supported the efforts to protect and expand post-secondary access to Georgia merit-based and needs-based student financial aid programs. Our organization recognizes Representative Stevens' proposal is a viable solution to ensure such success. Our policy perspective, our membership feels that legalized gambling is to be expanded in the state to include destination casino resorts. This decision should be made by a statewide referendum where local voters are given the opportunity to decide what is best for their communities. The Georgia Chamber appreciates this body's support in making our state a better place for business, and again would ask for your favorable consideration in supporting House Bill 677 and H.R. 807. And Mr. Chairman, this entire hearing today is about one thing and one thing only. Gambling in the state of Georgia is legal. And I'm asking you to consider to fully fund the Hope Scholarship, the Hope Grant, pre-K funding, and other measures that we've talked about through this measure to continue this conversation.
All right. Anything else from the committee? We've heard the presentations, pro and con. Representative Mitchell.
Mr. Chair, at this time, I'd like to make do pass a motion for HB 677 and HR 807, the resolution and enabling resolution as such.
And that would be passed by substitute. We have substitutes.
By substitute.
Committee substitute. All right, we have move and second that the HB 677 and the HR 807 pass. Move and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Ayes